And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Wednesday, the first day of October 2025. And starting out with the sea ice, we are seeing a little bit of early development along the Beaufort Sea coast between Utqiagvik and Prudhoe Bay, and further north too, up in as you get offshore, further along into the Arctic Ocean. And this trend will only continue as we gradually get colder here through the month of October, early November. Now, one thing of note, though, is that we are going to see a series of wet, mild, and windy North Pacific lows crossing up into the Bering Sea and spreading moisture north and eastward. So it's going to become quite wet across this region as we head through this upcoming weekend and in through mid-month. And at times, there's going to be surges of milder air coming a little further north, so that could potentially delay the extent of ice development, especially down here along the Chukchi Sea coast. In the meantime, though, starting out on this Wednesday afternoon, we have a area of low pressure just off of Vancouver, convective in nature. You can see some potentially showers and maybe a few thunder showers. Fair amount of clearing out here, though, into the eastern Gulf, northern Panhandle around Yakutat, thanks to a ridge of high pressure. And then off to the west here, we have low pressure just outside of Norton Sound, and areas of scattered showers around it with more in the way of some rain pushing inland, encountering colder air. So we're going to have snow breaking out along the Alaska Range this Wednesday evening, continuing into Thursday with some accumulations. Also up there in the higher elevations above Fairbanks, some snow expected where winter weather advisory is in effect. But off to the south and west here, down along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians into the North Pacific, there's a pretty good area of moisture and warmer temperatures. We have sea surface temperatures south of the Aleutian chain in the North Pacific that are running quite a bit above normal, anywhere from about 5.5 to nearly 9 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for this time of year. So with that kind of moisture or temperatures, sea surface temperatures in place, it's going to provide fuel, energy for these low pressures crossing the North Pacific, also providing ample moisture. So as we go through the day Thursday, we have the secondary low that's forming this Wednesday evening around Cook Inlet. It'll shift east to just outside of Hinchinbrook entrance for Thursday afternoon, and that's going to enhance some rainfall along Cook Inlet and out here along the eastern Kenai for this Wednesday night, and especially into Thursday morning. A pretty strong feed of moisture coming in along the coastal mountains here of the north and northeastern Gulf Coast into the northern parts of the Panhandle. But back to the south and west, here's the next low. This is going to become the main system for the weekend. It'll be crossing the western half of the Aleutians around Friday afternoon. And as that low takes a northeastward track, it'll deepen further, staying probably just above 970 millibars. But there's a lot of warm air south of the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula there Friday afternoon, evening. Some of that warmer air is going to pull up along the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island may get into that a bit, but it's going to push a lot of mild air, windy conditions. In fact, those of you along Kuskokwim Bay, just kind of keep an eye on things for late Friday night and Saturday. This area could see some stronger southeast-south winds that will cause higher surf, maybe even a little minor coastal flooding potentially, or at least get the surf levels up higher than the normal high tide. So keep that in mind for Saturday. And by the time we do get into the weekend, that system will continue north and eastward. So for Thursday, inner channels of the Panhandle, kind of a mixed bag of winds. Westerly 10 knots, Dixon entrance outside there, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, waves 2-3 feet. As we go up Stevens Passage to Lynn Canal, 15 to 20 knot southerly winds, gusting to 35 knots. Lynn Canal with waves upwards of 4 feet there in Lynn Canal. For the outer coast, northwest winds 15 knots outside of Port Alexander and off the Prince of Wales Island. As we go further north, look for south winds turning southeasterly, increasing 30 to 35 knots outside of Cross Cove, and on the way on up here off of Cape Suckling, we could see 35-knot southeasterly gales at around 9 knots. And then for Friday, winds will be south-southeast, 15 to 20 knots for the inner channels. Waves 6-7 feet down here off of Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Around 3 feet, Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal. Generally west winds to 20 knots outside of Cross Sound down through Sitka and off of Craig, with waves 10-12 feet. Northeast, east winds 10 knots out of Yakutat Bay and around Cape Suckling. For Thursday, strongest winds across the western Gulf will be out of Lower Cook Inlet and just north there of Kodiak Island. 35-knot westerly gales with waves up to 10 feet. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, southwest winds 25 knots, waves 10 feet or so. Within Prince William Sound, look for south winds of 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. And then on the backside of the low circulation that's going to be in this general area, we find north-northeast winds around 15 knots, Upper Cook Inlet with waves a couple few feet. Winds come down for the most part for Friday. West winds 15 knots, Prince William Sound waves a couple few feet. We could see winds, though, in the lower portion of Cook Inlet, southwest to south winds 25 to 30 knots. Off of Anchor Point, maybe some 5, 6, 7-foot waves there. And across Kodiak Island on Thursday, winds will be westerly at 25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet back through Bristol Bay, and then winds become more northwesterly, 20 to 25 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet on the North Pacific side and 6 to 8 feet on the Bering side. For Friday, winds continue southwest 25 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, waves again 5 to 6 feet. As we trail out down along the Alaska Peninsula, generally south winds around 20 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet off of Falls Pass, Sand Point, Chicknick. And on the other side there, the Bering side, waves generally running 5 feet, the wider expanse of Bristol Bay and north of Cold Bay. For the Aleutians Thursday, winds will generally be west-northwest 20-25 knots over the eastern Aleutians, becoming southwesterly at 20 to 25 knots, especially from around the central Aleutians, Atka, Adak westward. But you'll really notice Friday with that low coming up out of the North Pacific, we have the low circulation that's going to be passing between Adak and Kiska, and it's going to have gale force winds, especially ahead of it. Strongest winds Friday in the Aleutian chain, Nikolsky through Atka, Adak. We're looking at 40 to 45 knots southerly winds with waves building 15 to maybe near 20 feet off of Adak. And then for Thursday, along the west-southwest coast, look for southwesterly winds of 25 knots across the Pribilofs up into Kuskokwim Bay with waves 10 feet out there around the Pribilofs. As we come up along the lower Yukon coastline, west-southwest winds of 25 knots and southwest winds of 20 knots into Norton Sound. Waves generally running 6 feet along the lower Yukon coast and 4 feet there within Norton Sound. For Friday, this is kind of, that low is still further south and west, but southwest winds 20 knots into Bristol Bay, south winds of 25 knots into Kuskokwim Bay, and this area here, again, Kwagilingok, Kipnik, this area, watch out for some higher surf action and higher water levels on Saturday, as the winds will likely be increasing to near gale force, and so that could cause some issues around high tide. And out toward the Pribilos, southerly winds to 30 knots at St. Paul and St. George. As we go further north, a mix of winds offshore 15 knots at Imanik, waves 3-4 feet, and west winds of 20 knots into Norton Sound with waves of 4 to 5 feet. South of the Bering Strait, winds will be westerly 10 knots into Wales, Port Clarence, Nome, 20 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island with waves 3 to 4 feet out in this area south of the strait. And then as we go up through the lower Chukchi Sea, strongest winds are going to be off of Wainwright, off of Point Lay, and around the Lisburn Peninsula, northeast winds to 25 knots with waves of 5 to 7 feet. Along the Beaufort Sea coast, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots at Utqiagvik to Prudhoe Bay, westerly 10 knots at Kaktovik with waves of 3 feet. And then for Friday, winds along the Beaufort Sea coast, generally west-northwest, 5 to 10 knots, waves a couple of feet or so. As we drop down along the lower Chukchi Sea, look for north-northwest winds at 15 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet. They'll maybe a little higher through the Bering Strait, 6-7 feet there. And as we go along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales, Port Clarence, north winds 15 knots, waves 4-5 feet, and on the north side of St. Lawrence, especially toward Gamble on Friday, winds will be northeasterly at 20 knots with waves generally around 5 to 6 feet.